Hey love, so welcome back to my channel. My name is Octavia, but here on YouTube I go by Miss Bam It's My Life, or aka for you guys who've been around from the beginning of time, Bama Girl Cafe. So today I decided to sit down and do this video and explain to some of you guys why I don't have any parents and why the only one living parent I have that is alive I no longer communicate with, and what was the breakdown in our relationship that made me decide to go ahead and cut ties with my biological father. The relationship has never been a healthy relationship. I'll start out by saying that. My dad is first of all, my dad is very handsome. I'll give him that. He's very handsome, and he comes off as a really nice, friendly person, but he's a narcissist. And he's verbally abusive. He's emotionally abusive. He's physically abusive. And he's just not a really nice guy. So I'm kind of glad that I did not grow up in the house with him. I had siblings who grew up in the house with him, and they seem to be a lot more traumatized than I am by just having him around. And he was there, but he wasn't really there. That's what I got from my other siblings. He was there in the house, but he wasn't there supporting them or doing anything for them. So he was just dead weight around the house. So I never got to experience him in that light, but they did. So let's start off. So my mom and dad got together when they were really young. They were still in high school. I think my mom was like 19 when she had me, and my dad was 17. And my mom had my sister when she was 18. She got pregnant when she was 17, and she had her when she was 18. She had me when she was 19, and I think my dad was 17. When they first got together, my dad lied about his age. So her baby daddy was 2 years younger than her. Okay. So my dad is very immature. He just never matured. And it's always a constant struggle to get along because we're not that many years apart. So it's kind of like he never grew up. So even as an adult, it was just really hard to deal with him because he's a man child. So I guess this video is going to be all over the place, but y'all just stick with me because it's really hard to do this video. But basically, my mom and dad was together, and they went their separate ways. I've been told two stories as to why my parents split up after I was born. One, he says that him and my mom just decided to go their separate ways because my family didn't want them together, and it just didn't work out. He found somebody else he cared about, which is my stepmom. The other stories say that my stepmom was living with my mom and my dad, and my mom came home and caught them together, and that's when they separated. I've heard stories about when my mom and dad first broke up, that he would break into her house. He assaulted her a couple of times. One time he broke into her house and he chased her with an iron. He plugged the iron up and tried to burn her face. I heard another story from one of my aunts about how they took my mom home when I was still a little baby, and they noticed that the front door to her apartment was open, and my aunt and them went in, and he was hiding in the closet with a knife. I guess he was gonna try to kill her. So I've heard different stories, but basically from what I heard from my mother before she passed, is that my dad was very abusive. He was very short-tempered. He was not good with children. He would throw us by our arms and different stuff, and she just didn't want to be a part of that. Now, this is all before my mom started showing signs of schizophrenia, and I'll have to do a different video on my mom before she got sick and started having mental issues. But basically, my mom said that she did kiss my dad with my stepmom, and that he was abusive, and that is why she decided that she didn't want to be with him anymore. Now, that is the story of where the breakdown, I guess, me and my dad relationship, because I can never really remember my dad really being in my life. and really being around. I don't really think I recognized my dad was my dad until I was like in first grade. Because he was so in and out. I knew he was there. I spent time with him, but I didn't really recognize that he was my dad because I spent a majority of my early childhood years before kindergarten with my grandparents. I stayed with my grandparents a lot. So to me, my grandfather was always my daddy because I always called him daddy. So when it finally clicked, I was like, "Ooh, girl, you got two daddies, but one of them don't never do nothing for you, and you'll never see him." So in one sense, I had a dad because my grandfather was there, but my biological dad was never there. As I got older, the relationship with me and my dad got worse. Frida, my older sister, she always missed him. She always cried for him. She always wanted to spend time with him. But I didn't know him like that. I had never built a bond with him because, like I said, by the time I had come along, they were already, separated and broken up. So Frida really missed our dad growing up. However, I didn't miss him because I didn't know his ass. And as I got to know him, I started to realize that I didn't like him. I started to realize that my dad was unreliable. He was very childish. He was super petty. He was never dependable. I would get excited when I was little to see him. I would make my mom get me all dressed up, and I would sit outside. We lived in some apartments. We lived upstairs. And my mom would get me all dressed up like when he would come to town because his wife was in the military. So he would call us and tell us he was coming to town and he was going to come see us. And my mom would, Saturday, she would get us up and get us ready. And I would be so excited to see him and to see my stepmom because she seemed to be more involved with us than he was. Like, she was the one who was really spending time with us. Before she went into the military, when we did spend time with our dad, it was with my stepmom. And she seemed to always be the one who was there for us, spending time with us, really just being caring. But that changed over the years, and I think it's because of how my dad treated her. But basically, my dad would have my mom get us ready Saturday morning, and we would wait all day for him to show up, and he would never show up, and I would be so crushed. I would be so heartbroken. I would cry. I can remember I got a sunburn one time because I fell asleep outside. Okay. I remember it was in July because he was supposed to come and see Frida for her birthday. I fell asleep outside and I got a sunburn because I fell asleep on the steps waiting for my dad. And my mom came outside because when she would try to get me to come in the house, I wouldn't. Finally, she came outside, and I think I was like in the first grade. Finally, she picked me up and took me in the house. And I just remember crying and just being so upset because I hadn't seen my dad in like a whole year. And I think as time went on, up until like all through elementary, him just popping in sporadically here and there, it just kind of affected me to the point to where I just didn't care if I saw him or not because I was tired of getting my feelings hurt. And I was already having a hard childhood dealing with my family and how they treated me. So I wanted that relationship with my dad, but it wasn't benefiting me emotionally. So I kind of just forgot about it. And when I would see him, I would see him. If I didn't see him, I didn't really think about it because I had my grandfather. When did me and my dad's relationship really start to go down the hill? The little bit of a relationship we had went down the hill when my mom died. And I'll explain that to y'all. My mom died in January of 1997. My dad came, well, first of all, I hadn't seen my dad in almost 2 years around the time that my mom had died. We hadn't talked to him or spoken to him. And his mom lived around the corner from my grandparents, and I would see her frequently, but she still treated us different than what she treated her other grandchildren. she never showed any love or really compassion or really care for us. So I didn't really expect anything from her. I would go and see her and check on her. And I was like in the 6th grade, 5th grade, but she really never just cared for us. Like sometimes she didn't want to be bothered with us when we would call her and ask her if we could come over. She always had some kind of excuses to why we couldn't come visit, but her other grandchildren were always there. So my mom died that January, and my sister was off in like state school, and they went to get her, and she went to my grandmother's house and told her, I need you to get in, I need my dad's phone number to get in contact with him. And my grandmother said that she didn't have the phone number. So his family would know where he was and how to get in contact with him, but they literally would not get in contact with him for us. So his family played a big part in it too. So when my sister told my sister told my grandmother that my mom had just died, she immediately got on the phone and called my dad. My dad came down and he was, oh, I'm going to be here for y'all. I'm going to take care of y'all. I want y'all to come live with me. And I just told him, you know, my mom just died. My baby sister is here. I don't want to live with you. I don't know you. My grandfather, at that point, I had been living with my grandfather for years, my grandparents, and I just basically told him, I don't want to live with you. And my dad was kind of like, I'm your dad. You should do what I tell you to do. And I was like, motherfucker, you ain't my dad. Like, I don't know you. Like, I didn't know him, so I wasn't so open to go see him. Now, most people would say, well, you were a child. You shouldn't have been able to make that decision. Well, I was able to make that decision. And I'm happy that I made that decision and that my grandfather backed me all the way to legally backing me, because my dad had no intentions of really taking care of us. My sister decided to go to North Carolina to live with my dad after my mom died. But it did not work out because they were abusing her. They had her locked up. They did a lot of crazy stuff to her. My grandfather made him sign a legal agreement saying that if she went to North Carolina and he had to send her back to Alabama, that he was going to be financially responsible for her. And he had to become financially responsible for her because eventually she ended up coming back to Mobile after she had been mistreated after my mom died. So I'm glad that, in a sense, that I didn't go. My dad only saw dollar signs, and that is the only reason he wanted to get custody of us when my mom died. So that was the big breakdown in our relationship, and the fact that I got into a fight at my mama's funeral with my dad. I just felt like my dad was so disrespectful. And that's really when I lost all respect for him. He put my mom through a lot. He would not pay child support. He wouldn't see us. He wouldn't do things for us because she didn't want to be with him. He basically made her struggle financially because she didn't want to be with him no more. And he also went as far as to tell us that when he got married, we weren't really his responsibility. My grandfather was taking care of us. He had a family to take care of, and that we were not a priority. So I definitely had lost all respect for him at that point, because you don't tell your children that you have a family to take care of and that we were not a priority. Those are his exact words. So I lost all respect from him. But the breakdown was basically, and we had that conversation when I was 10 and I hadn't talked to him in 2 years. And then my mom died and he showed up. And then he wants to kind of like jump in and take over as a parent. But only for financial reasons, because he knew we were going to get Social Security. So basically at my mom's funeral, my dad leaned over in the casket and kissed her in front of his wife. He kissed a dead woman in front of his wife. First of all, that fucked me up. You know, if I was his wife, we would have been divorced. And when he did that, I just felt like he disrespected her because he put her through so much. The way he treated her, the way he disrespected her, and then for you to lean over in her casket and kiss her. I don't think I was the only person in the church that wanted to whip his ass. I just think I was the only one bold enough to beat his ass. So basically, me and my dad got into a fight at my mama's funeral, and I whipped his ass all up and through the church in front of the casket because I had so much anger in me from how he had treated her and the things he had put her through. And she was so sick and she struggled so much. And if he would have been there and done his part as a parent, then I feel like my mom would have been a lot better off. And we would have been a lot better off if he would have just stepped up and been a parent, even if they weren't together. So that was pretty much the breakdown of our relationship. He moved to Mobile for a little bit, but we still couldn't get along. I think I was like in the 9th grade when they moved to Alabama. Me and my dad still could not get along. I was in high school at the time. He was in town living there, but I still would barely see him. When I would go to his house, we would be treated different. I don't know what happened between him and my stepmom, but I feel like her attitude towards us changed as we got older. And it was because of how my dad had treated her. It was like she kind of resented us because they moved back to Alabama, and I think it was his idea. But I really think my dad wanted to be back in Alabama so he could be a raging whore. And then about a year and a half later, they moved to North Carolina, and I really didn't talk to him. He didn't show up at my high school graduation. He just didn't show up. He didn't show up for homecoming or anything. And what was crazy to me, my 10th grade year, his grandmother died. And he wanted me to go to his grandmother's funeral. And I told them simply, I'm not going to this funeral. It was homecoming. The funeral was on homecoming. I had basically just buried my grandmother. And I didn't want to go to a funeral. My dad was pissed at me. And he held that grudge for years. And I'm going to tell y'all how low and classless my dad is. He held that grudge and he used it on me at the time I needed him the most. My grandfather died. I called my dad and I said, my grandfather died. You know, Frida is not, she has a lot of issues. I'm here by myself. I need your help. Can you just come here and be like emotionally support for us throughout this time of the funeral? He told me he was coming. My dad never showed up for my grandfather's funeral. He didn't show up. And when my sister called him and asked him why he didn't show up, he replied I didn't have to show up because when I needed her for emotional support, she wasn't there for me when my grandmother died. Isn't that amazing? That's what his excuse for not showing up when my grandfather died. Even though his stepdad died a year before my grandfather, and I had to physically help his mother get the funerals together and to make sure that she didn't sign any paperwork. Me and my family helped her before he could get there because one of his siblings were trying to get her to sign over everything, all the insurance money to them, and they was going to take control of it and swindle her out of everything. So me and one of my aunts and my sister actually helped my grandmother not to lose everything that her dead husband had left her to her kids. So I didn't understand, how were you trying to pay me back when I'm in high school and I'm sitting here in a lawyer's office helping your mom, and here almost 4 years later, you don't even show up to my grandfather's funeral. So you would think that would be the last straw. So I didn't talk to my dad for a few years after my grandfather's funeral. I really didn't want anything to do with him. And I was kind of okay with that. And then I got sick. I got vertigo. If you don't catch vertigo, I don't know where it comes from. I ended up with vertigo after working like a dog in my early 20s. I got really sick. I was kind of in and out of the hospital. I had to quit my job. I had enough money to live on, but it wasn't going to be sustainable living in Mobile. I had a high standard of living because I was making good money and I wanted to conserve my money. And then I decided that I wanted to go back to school, and I was just trying to figure out what to do. And I felt like, okay, my dad has been trying to make contact with me. Let me just call him because I knew my family wasn't going to help me. So I made a decision to call my dad and tell him what was going on. And he asked me, did I want to come live with him? Now, at first I was reluctant. I had thought about like moving to California with one of my friends. I thought about going back towards like New York. Frida was living in Virginia. I thought about going to Virginia, but I prayed and I kind of like meditated on it. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to take my dad up on his offer. I had other places to go, but I was saying, I'm going to take my dad up on his offer. You know, we all make mistakes. Let's move back. Let's move to Fayetteville because I had lived there for like 6 months before with them. And I knew that that wasn't going to work. That's a whole nother story, y'all. But I decided to move there in 2011. And I don't want to say it was a mistake because it's led me to where I am now. But when I moved there, my dad took advantage of me because I was sick. He knew that I had a lot of money. So he had a cab business, and his cabs and stuff would always break down, and he just wasn't good with money. He wasn't really helping my stepmom or whatever. I didn't tell my stepmom that I was giving my dad money, but my dad milked me out of almost $4,000 giving him money. He milked me out of money. All my jewelry that I had, between my dad and my brother, they stole jewelry from me that my ex-boyfriend had bought me. I'm talking about a lot of jewelry, y'all. Between the money that I had given my dad and the jewelry that my dad and my brother stole from me, cell phones, I was almost out of $7,000. And my stepmom, she put me on her benefits so that I could go back to school, and she really did help me. I would never take that away from her. She did try to help me. She was really there for me when I was sick, even though my dad wasn't. But I feel like with my stepmom, she had been so mistreated by my dad and her family, that she had displaced aggression and anger towards me. The way they would talk to each other, I just was never able to talk to my family like that, even though my family had done a lot of things to me. But I was at that point in my life to where I felt like you shouldn't say things to your loved ones and walk out of a door because you don't never know what happened. And my stepmom was infamous for when she'd get mad, the things she would say and her reactions would be so strong. And I just couldn't believe like how she was. And I started to realize this is not solely her fault. It's the amount of trauma and abuse she suffered in her childhood, which we both had talked about extensively, and how my dad had treated her. He had done so much to this woman over the years. I told her she needs to leave him, and she just would not leave him. They still together. I can't really say anything bad about my stepmom because even when my dad wasn't doing anything, she still tried to do it. I just think that she was so hurt by the things he had done to her over the years. And y'all, my daddy is a dog. He's a dog. He is the worst type of person. I feel bad for her because she didn't deserve the way he treated her. She doesn't deserve it. She put a lot of love into him, and I feel like he shitted on her the whole marriage. She's a lovely person, but she's taking the brunt of his mistreatment. And I do love my stepmom because when I really needed somebody, she was there. But can I say my dad was there? Definitely. He was never there. Even when I was living with him, my dad was never there. When I would get sick and have to go to the hospital, my dad would never show up. My stepmom and my sister would come. And it was crazy. He was never there. He stole from me. He just was never there. The ending, and I was just done. So when I finally decided to move to South Carolina, that's around the time I got married. My dad was supposed to come to South Carolina for the wedding, and he did not show up for my wedding. I sent invitations, which it kind of happened quick. I sent invitations. I went down to see them. My stepmom had things that she couldn't do, so that's why she didn't come. The wedding did come together really quick. My dad didn't want to wear a suit. He said he was not a suit type of person. Y'all know I had a military wedding, so it was formal. He did not show up to my wedding, y'all. My stepmom called me that morning, but I was already downstairs taking pictures. And something happened. I don't know who answered my phone, but I apologized to her about what happened. But my dad basically didn't show up, and he made it seem like to my sister and my stepmom that I didn't give him the information. My dad had all the information. He knew what church I was getting married at on base. He had all the information, all of it. And he basically made them think that I didn't invite him to the wedding and I didn't want him there. And he said that he was really hurt because I didn't. He's my dad and he should have gave me away and walked me down the aisle. And I was so hurt that he didn't show up on my wedding. He never showed up for prom. He never showed up for homecoming. He never showed up for anything. And he had the nerve to be mad at me and said that he didn't want anything to do with me because I didn't invite him to my wedding. So he cut me off, not realizing that I had already cut him off. So basically, that was the last time I talked to my dad. Probably 2 months, probably a month before my wedding. That was the last conversation I had with my dad. My dad was afraid that I was going to ask him for money for my wedding. And he stopped talking to me. So after he pulled all of that, I decided to go ahead and end the relationship with my dad. So I literally have not talked to my dad in 6 years. I love my dad, but I don't like him as a person. I think he is a narcissist. I think he's emotionally abusive. He's physically abusive. He can be financially abusive. I feel like he takes advantage of people. The amount of money that my dad swindled me out of when I was sick is disgusting. How he stole from me, how my brother stole from me is also very sickening. They took a lot from me when I needed everything that I had the most. It took me a long time to financially recover from that. And I wish him nothing but the best. I'm not mad at him anymore. I realize that a lot of issues that I've had in relationships as a young woman, some of the daddy issues spilled out into those relationships. And I had to forgive myself for allowing my daddy issues to transfer over into my relationships. And I think a lot of times because even though my grandfather was there and I saw what I should be treated like and how I should be respected, I feel like in my younger years, I chased men who gave me a little bit of attention because I was craving that attention from my dad. That is no longer the case now. And y'all can take that however y'all want. So I no longer talk to my dad. That was the final straw. Me and my dad have had numerous encounters, physically encounters. And when I say physical, I mean we even went blow for blow. I had to choke my dad out one time because he was fighting my stepmom. And I just couldn't stand it. So my dad is very violent towards women. And the one thing I hated the most is that he the way he treated my sisters. Every time I think of how he treated them, I get disgusted because they deserve so much more from him as a father, especially with him being in the house. And I think he failed them. Not only did he fail me and Alfreda, but I also think he failed my other siblings. I don't really talk about them a lot because I don't know how to really reach out to them after leaving North Carolina. I love my siblings. I don't necessarily get along with my younger brother, but the relationship has just been so raggedy until it's caused me to have to cut ties. I feel like with people I want to be a part of my life. Like I have a nephew that I don't get to see anymore. I'm not gonna cry. That I don't really get to see or talk too much because he's with my stepmom and my dad. I love my siblings. I love my stepmom despite um us not talking, and I don't know where we keep going wrong to where we lose touch, but I do love her and I have a lot of respect for her. I miss my nephew. I miss talking to my other sister because we were really close in Fayetteville. And I understand why she is the way she is because my dad he failed them. He could have done more to help their mom. He could have done more to help my mom. And I know that my dad probably struggled a lot because of his childhood. But I feel like he just let all of his kids down. And what bothers me the most is that not only did he let his kids down, but the only two women in the world who actually loved him and took care of him, he mistreated them. He mistreated my mom and he mistreated his wife. And that is what I find the most disgusting because he could have done better by all the women in his life. And I feel like he failed us all. And the saddest part is that he failed his wife. I still feel like my dad failed his wife, and I feel like she deserves better. But yeah, it caused me to have a lot of daddy issues. It caused me to be kind of rough and hard on the men that I dated. So yeah, that's why I don't talk to my dad. It's so many more stories I can tell y'all about how it has affected my life. Not having a relationship with the only living parent that I have. I don't have any communication with my dad's mom. I don't even know if my grandmother is still alive. I never really had a relationship with my dad's father because he didn't really have a relationship with his father. I have a whole part of me that I have missed culture-wise. Like, y'all, can you imagine knowing that you're a part of something that you've never experienced? I can't even tell you anything about my Asian heritage or my culture. Only things that I know are things that I have looked up on the internet and that I've found. Some of the medical issues that I've had. There are issues that most Asian people deal with that I don't know about. My dad, he failed us, and over the last couple of months and weeks, I've been thinking like I gotta let go of all of the hurt and the anger that I have towards him, and I've really been like trying to pray about it and trying to like talk it out. And I feel like this video is a way for me to get it out there and just say it. I know that my sister follows me on Facebook, so she'll probably see this video. And I hope that she shares it with him. But I'm no longer angry with my dad. I love him still. I wish him the best, but I know that we're never going to be close again. We've never had a close relationship. And I have to learn to be okay with that. And it hurts because he is the only person I have that is connected to me DNA wise. And for us not to be able to sit down and talk, for him to say that he's done with me when I've done nothing to him but try to be a part of his life. I've tried so many times to mend that relationship. There's nothing else I can do. So this is it. Um, this is why you guys never see my dad. This is why I don't ever talk to my dad. I don't hate him. I love him, but I know that we're never going to be family. And it took me a long time to accept that. Even with all the things he's put me through, I was still willing to like try. But I don't hold any anger in my heart towards him. I'm not mad at him. I don't hate him. I'm happy that they made the decision to create me despite all the things I've been through. But I know that it's time to move on with my life. And I'm making this video to kind of bring closure. So if you guys were wondering why y'all never see my dad, or why you guys never see like anything dealing with my other siblings, or why you never really see me talk about my other nephew, that's probably why. But I am going to try to reconnect with my siblings, and hopefully with my sister, in hopes that I can get more time with her and see my nephew. Hopefully she believes what I have to tell her pertaining to my dad. I can only hope and pray. And I guess that's it. I love you guys. Thank y'all for tuning in. And I'm sorry this video was so long. But I guess I'll see you guys back here in a couple of days. And as you guys can see, I'm in the studio, my closet. So we'll be getting more videos from here. I'm going to do a room tour probably in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, I love y'all, and I'll see y'all later.